They go, give us your shoes. And you go, what? And they literally take your shoes off and they put them shoes in the bag. But the bag says no shoes, no news. I just remember saying something and like getting a laugh or getting a reaction. And just for a second, I smelled blood. And I was like, this is what I want to do. I'm Irish, but I'm not from Ireland, if that makes sense. And so you feel completely at one with the country. And I feel very at home there. I feel like I'm from there and I'm not from there at exactly the same time. And I woke up and it just absolutely... You know, when you know, and I was running over people, kicking people in the head and stuff, but I was like, I'm so sorry. And I got to what I thought was the toilet, it was a broom cupboard. I am never happier than when I'm driving around in a dusty espadrille and a t-shirt or no top on, and I'm just swimming in the sea, picking up stuff for dinner and coming home. And you know, I've had the best meals of my life are on plastic plates at the side of a beach down there.
Dermot O'Leary, welcome to the Travel Diaries. It is
Thank you, Holly.
Lovely to see you. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm very well travelled. I'm very good. I feel very rested. If slightly jet lagged, I just got back from holiday.
Oh, where were you?
I went to the Maldives, a place called Saniva Fushi.
Oh my goodness, that's an iconic hotel.
Yeah, and it was a really lovely kind of break. Me and the family, we haven't had sort of a proper holiday for a long time. And just the three of us, and it was, you know, it's everything you want it to be. You know, it's that lovely kind of combination of you're just relaxing, you're around nature, you know. And they have this great thing where they take you get on the boat, and they just come up to you at the bag, and just go, give us your. I mean, not like this, but they go, give us your shoes. And you go, what? And they literally take your shoes off, and they make you take your shoes off, and they put them shoes in the bag, and they just. And they give you the bag. Or no, they didn't even give you the bag, but the bag says no shoes, no news. And that's their thing. It's like, forget about it. No shoes, no news.
Literal barefoot luxury.
It was one, and me and my wife just turned to each other like 3 or 4 days into it and went, why do we ever pack shoes when we go on holidays like this? Because, you know, and we're not sort of, you know, we know the vibe that, and our vibe is never sort of, you know, it's never hills by the pool. Do you know what I mean? It's always very quite low key and lovely. But even there, you're like, yeah, you know, I'll bring some espadrilles or something. You never use any of them. You just walk around for a whole week in barefoot. It was wonderful. We had the best time.
That is so gorgeous.
My son snorkeled for the first time, and he loves the water. And he thinks, like we saw a stingray while we were over there, and saw it just eating. So it was on the bottom of the ocean, of the bed. Like a couple, just a meter and a half down, and he was just kind of shifting all the sands, and then moved off and did so elsewhere. He now thinks he sees that every time he goes snorkeling.
You set the bar high.
I said to him, it's not always going to be like this, buddy. So it was the best time.
Oh, that's so nice and well deserved, because you are the busiest man in showbiz. So I'm glad that you got a chance to properly switch off. It is a very special place.
I tell you what it does as well, Holly. I think travel always does this. It just, you come back and it doesn't last forever, but you come back with a sense of priorities. And I'm not particularly into self-help or anything like that, but it's that notion of, you know what, those 5 emails that you don't get around to answering that day are still going to be there tomorrow. So just try and give yourself chunks and manage your diary better, and just go, you know, just do 2 things in half a day, and that's fine, rather than try and cram 6 or 7 in, which just makes you so stressed.
You say on a day of busy promo.
yeah. But no, today's been busy, but it's been the right side of busy. You know, I was still I went down the ponds and had a swim this morning.
Oh, nice.
You know, and so it's just, you know, I did the school run, all the sort of like the small little blessing stuff that I just, you know, the big stuff in your day, really, the important stuff in your day.
Yeah, travel always helps to shift perspective, I think. And we've got a lot of travel to cover today, because we're going to go on a journey through the 7 chapters of your life's travel diaries, Dermot.
Oh, yeah, great. Holy moly.
I know. And we kick off with chapter 1, which is your earliest childhood travel memory. What would that be?
It was very easy. It was all, and it was my earliest memory for a long time. It was back to Ireland, and so many people, I'm sure your listeners will resonate with this if they're from Irish families. But it was, you pack the car up, you drive in an old car down old roads. So just to contextualise it for anyone that wasn't born in the 70s or 80s, when you got in a car back then and you drove, that was just for the day. There was no, like, if you were lucky and stop in a Little Chef.
Yeah.
And I loved a Little Chef. God, if they could just bring back Little Chefs was so great, and not even roasted
and Happy
glasses.
Eaters, Happy Eater,
Yeah,
and Little
I could
Chef.
take a Happy Eater, but I was all about a Little Chef.
That was your fave.
Oh God, yeah. And there's no reason as to why Little Chef shouldn't still be here. I'm livid. Anyway, we drive through Wales or through England, then over the bridge through Wales. Always stop somewhere in St David's or Fishguard where we had relatives, and then we would get the ferry back, and then we'd see Tusker View, which is the lighthouse in Wexford, which is very important to me and my family. And I've named I've got a trust that is like a mentorship scheme that gets underrepresented kids in television, and we give them mentors, and I've called it the Tusker Trust because it was the last lighthouse last piece of Ireland my father and my mother saw as they emigrated, and it's the first piece you see when you go back.
Oh, that's so nice.
So it always feels like home. And my dad grew up in a street called Tusker View where you could see the lighthouse from the street. So you see the lighthouse, and then you pull in, and invariably there were always two ferries. There was either the 3 in the afternoon ferry, which we never took, or the 3 in the morning ferry, which we always took. So you sort of travel through the night, and then you get into Wexford in the morning. And it would either be, I mean, you couldn't really stay with family because my family didn't have the room for us to stay with. There's 4 of us. And my father grew up in a kind of 2 up, 2 down, same as my mum, kind of like very small Irish sort of working class terrace house. And so we would do a lot of people would do, which we spent a lot of my summers in caravans and by the beach. And it's funny talking about food and stuff with doing the promo. A lot of people mention it. One of my earliest food memories is my mum cooking up mackerel and just stinking the place out. This sort of tiny caravan we're staying in, stinking the place out of just frying this mackerel. And I was just enchanted. She just fried this mackerel in butter, and I was in heaven. And that's where I fell in love with mackerel. So it was Ireland, specifically Wexford, and these gorgeous beaches of Carn and Coraclow. Which still sort of are so sort of indelible on me and so sort of formative in my upbringing.
Oh, sounds so idyllic being right there on the beach, so that you can have that kind of quintessential childhood summer holiday.
It's, you know what it is, Holly? It's banana sandwiches on the beach. It's chocolate digestives. And the thing about Ireland is it's kind of familiar and alien at the same time. So the ice creams are a bit different, and the chocolate's a bit different, and the crisps are a bit different, and all of that kind of it was this kind of relatively run of the mill stuff, but it just as a kid, and still even now,
it's like a little bit exotic.
Well, I'm never happier than when I'm in a foreign supermarket.
Yes, same here.
I could spend hours in a foreign supermarket.
So what are the things that you'd always buy when you went to Ireland?
2 ice creams. So one ice cream is called, their soft ice is amazing, but they'd have an ice cream called a Loop the Loop.
Oh.
Which was basically sort of a bit like a Zoom with chocolate. So it was lemon and lime covered in chocolate. So it was almost like what are those Jamaican limes or something, the boiled sweets. They tasted a bit like that in ice cream form. And then they had a thing called an ice burger. They're not wafers, like dark biscuits with vanilla ice cream in the middle. But their vanilla ice cream was always white, like ice, like HB, icy white. And so that was huge. And then the crisps were obviously Tato's. And then there's a crisp that I was obsessed with and still am, called Rancheros, which is like it's a bacon flavor because it's like a puffed up frazzle, basically. It's next level.
So fun. And I mean, obviously you're back with a new series of Taste of Ireland, and we're going to chat about that, as the interview goes on. But it's interesting how the memories that you're associating with your childhood travel there are sensory memories, they're food memories. Is it food that really is really transportative for you?
Yeah, food and smells, and like just that taste of the sea as well always reminds me of childhood, because, and even now, like all our time that's not in London, and I love London, but all my time that's not in London is by and large spent by the coast, because it's my mum and dad in Ireland by the sea, our Norwegian family by the fjords. We spent a lot of time in Italy by the sea, and my wife's family from Broadstairs. So it's all kind of coastal and all very salty.
Oh, lovely. Is your wife part Norwegian?
Yeah, she's half Norwegian, yeah.
as almost like a child of two fathers, because you were living in London, in Colchester, and you had an English life during the week and an Irish one on the weekends. You said, I think,
Yeah.
and when you went back to Wexford, or when you went to Wexford, not went back, when you went to Wexford, did it feel like you were returning to kind of the real world of your parents talked about at home? Or how
Yeah,
did
yeah. It's funny you say not going back, but it always felt like going back.
it did?
It always,
Right.
it always felt, and I've sort of, I wouldn't go as far as I was confused, but or conflicted. But just you are sort of when you, and I speak to this a lot with. I've got two of my mates that are second generation Jamaican, and they kind of feel the same way.
Mm-hmm.
In that, and I talked to Ali about this a lot, Ali Hammond. We've got this kind of shared experience, and the Jamaican and Irish experience is a similar experience anyway. But you feel at once like I've sort of come to terms with it now. And I said it without even thinking it, and so many people have come up to me and said since I read an interview or saw an interview I said about, and they've gone, that really there's a real touchstone for me, which is that, like, I'm Irish, but I'm not from Ireland, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. It does. Yeah.
And so you feel completely at one with the country, and I feel very at home there. And I feel like I'm from there, and I'm not from there at exactly the same time. And also, I love Britain, and Britain and Ireland have got such a complex but brilliant relationship. There's a real fondness, certainly for the Brits to the Irish, and also vice versa. I think, there's a lot of complex history there, and there's a lot of, but there's also a lot of commonality there.
Yeah, exactly. And so getting to go back and make this second season, how did it feel getting back onto Irish soil and getting to spend that time there?
I worked out that, I mean, it's very familiar to me now, and it always has been. It always felt like home, or one of my homes. But like I was there 8 times last year, so it's
8 times.
I'm definitely
wow.
there. Yeah, I'm definitely there a lot. But what I loved about the second series is, and actually, one of the reasons why I wanted to do it. There's a series, even though the first series we spent a lot of our time we spent in Leinster and specifically Wexford, obviously where my whole family are from, and that felt very familiar to me. What I loved about this series is it's not that it doesn't feel familiar, but it feels very much like a voyage of discovery as well. So I'm sort of ticking off these unbelievable places that I've always wanted to visit. Never been to, because the idea of coming home. I don't know what your origins are. I'm picking up a Jewish name, so I don't know if it's European or Central European or.
It's actually similar to origins, I guess, Eastern European, but similar to what you were saying in that I'm an American, but who's always lived in England. So have an American passport. So that same kind of like dual identity, yeah.
But when you would you go back to America much when you were a child and see your family?
Yes, every school holiday.
Right.
Yeah.
And whereabouts was that?
Miami.
Okay, yeah. So if you go to Miami, the idea of then you turn around to your family and saying, we're going to go to California for 2 weeks, you'd be excommunicated, right? Like the idea that you would go back and then go somewhere else and not spend your time with them would be so, not even alien, treacherous would be like, like I would just, like my family just wouldn't have spoken to my mother and father had we gone back and then gone, we're going to go to Kerry or we're going to go to Galway. So growing up, I never got to know the west of the country at all. And the north of the country at all. So it was either Dublin for the day or Wexford. And Dublin even only came later when I was a bit older. So really getting to know the north and getting to know the west, and like friends of mine who are from the north have always said, like the people in the north of Ireland holiday in Donegal in the same way people in Dublin holiday in Wexford. So Wexford's called the sunny southeast.
Yeah.
And it puts that name to the test, let me tell you, Holly. But in Donegal, so a lot of people would have their holidays in Donegal, and so I've always wanted to go there. And it's nowhere you pass through. It kind of reminds me, not in its geography, but it has the same sort of vibe as Norfolk in that you're not going through it. So if you're going there, you are going there. And that kind of shapes an identity, I think. But Donegal and Sligo really captured my heart.
It's that kind of wilder, more untamed
Yeah,
part of
definitely,
Ireland that's
definitely.
just brilliant. And you begin the series on the Causeway coastal route, which is one of the most like cinematic drives in the world. For anyone who hasn't done that journey, how would you describe that route? And if they wanted to kind of follow in your footsteps, what would you tell them not to rush?
I mean, don't rush the drive. And sometimes we had this brilliant producer called Connell, who was our fixer over there.
Mm-hmm.
Connell's amazing. He's brilliant. Always great to have a local fixer. The problem with a local fixer is they are used to seeing what they're seeing. So he'd happily drive 70 miles an hour through the most beautiful part of the island. And I kept saying to him, would you just slow down and just stop so I can just take all this in? So don't meander is what I'd say. And it's an easy thing to say because you need to get from A to B. That I would describe it as, I tell you what I said, we were filming for about 3 or 4 days last August, and then we filmed for a few weeks in August, and then we stopped for the weather because the winter closed in, and I had other work back home, and then we went back again in March. So we literally just finished sort of 2 big chunks of filming, but when we were there in August, the weather was insane, and I remember we put a drone up. Craig, our cameraman, put this drone up, and I said to the guys, our team, because we've got a very lovely tight team, that's sort of done the whole 2 series together. There's only sort of 6
That's
or
so
7.
nice.
It's
So
really
nice.
lovely. So we get on so well together. Stay in the same hotels, eat the same food, just like break the same bread. So we always have breakfast and dinner together, and then spend most of the day eating. But and I said to them, like Americans are going to watch this and they're going to do us under the Trade Descriptions Act because we made it look like Northern California. It was just so gorgeous, like these sheer, beautiful cliffs sweeping the glens of Amtrak, coming down into the sea. The sea was incredible, but I have never experienced weather like that in Ireland for that period of time. So it
lucky.
was absolutely epic. Yeah, the one thing I would say, I think my favourite town was a little town called Ballycastle, which is this gorgeous little beach town, almost straight out of New England. It's a real, not clapperboardy. It was very Irish, but full of lovely independent bakeries and shops and just this cute. And the weather was good. Just a really lovely town to kind of grow up in. And then as you sort of you get past Port Rush and Port Stewart, and you get out there pretty much towards Derry, and it's a straight shot, and it's just this gorgeous long beaches. And then you're pretty much in Donegal. So it's as a drive, it's just the Causeway coastal is just the most spectacular, epic, sweeping. So don't rush it, whatever you do, and just stop in the places. And the food's great. I mean, we went. One of my favourite dinner we had there was in a restaurant called Lear, LIR, and I think Stevie's the name of him and his wife. And by the way, everywhere we went was just good-looking couples that have got together, traveled the world, come back, and then started restaurants together. And they you walk in and you just go, really good-looking tattooed guys with beards. Oh, come on, make you feel so inferior. And then just like powerhouse wives that run everything. It was so impressive.
The modern Irish dynamic.
Yeah, they were a restaurant called Lear. And they're sort of nose to tail seafood, which is pretty much my idea of heaven. So everything in there they sort of use. So like the dips for the mayo and aioli at the start were like pollock skin or cod skin or something. You're just like deep crispy, really salty, really good.
Where was that?
Yeah. That was in Coleraine,
which is near to.
It's funny. It's I guess it's kind of inland from Port Rush and Port Stewart by about 5-6 miles. It's on a river. It's not necessarily like a big foodie place, but they've got this restaurant there, and like a lot of these success stories, they started in lockdown. I think they started delivering lobster. They could get lobster from their friend Paul, who was a local fisherman, and then he said, "You guys should be doing this," and then it sort of just.
Love that kind of story. Well, let's pause there for a sec and move on to chapter 2 of your travel diaries. And that's the first place that you fell in love with.
So I reckon France, because when we realised we didn't have to go back to Ireland every year, and I fell in love with Cornwall and Norfolk because those were the places we went camping. But our first holiday, we did a Euro camp in France. And there was 2 places, one in the Dordogne and then one on the Atlantic coast. And we drove down, and we've always loved camping as a family. And I just remember, and it's going to be sights and smells and tastes again, but it was that kind of beautiful dry heat of the Dordogne. I remember French fries and crepes on motorways,
Totally.
and just that, that lovely. I mean, there's nothing like a hot French fry in France on the side of a motorway with mayo or whatever, and then just a shit ton of crepes with like crepes and confiture was just, I just lived off that, and pain au chocolat. Literally the first time you ever had pain au chocolat when you were a kid, you just think it's from the gods. And then I think heading out to the Atlantic, and once again, like, I think it was Rouen we stayed in, maybe. And my parents were pretty fearless. My dad loved sailing, so we went on a lot of kind of sailing, not flotilla holidays, but dinghy holidays where we went to Turkey in 1987, I think, before anyone was really going to Turkey. Yeah.
Which bit? Do you remember?
We went to near Bodrum.
Amazing coastline.
Yeah, it's gorgeous coastline. There was hardly anyone there then, and so, but they were kind of quite kind of go-getter and fearless for that. In that we didn't have an awful lot of money, but it was probably quite cheap at the time as well going to Turkey. But I'd say France.
I love that kind of quintessential French summer holiday that we all had, where you like probably similar, not wearing shoes for a lot of the time, running around on the grass.
None of that.
Yeah. So transporting. And we're in the chapter of falling in love. When did you fall in love with broadcasting, would you say? What do you think was a moment where you were like, this is the life for me?
There were two. I wanted to be an actor when I was a kid, and then I realized the more I rehearsed, the worse I got. And I thought, maybe this isn't the life for me. So, and that was pretty much halfway through my drama GCSE. But we put on a concert when I was about 15, 16. I went to a lovely Catholic school, which was a state school. It wasn't particularly academically particularly good school. It was a very religious with a small R is probably how I describe it. Like, everyone left being a member of Amnesty, but probably didn't pass their maths GCSE. And and we put on this concert, and would have been 1988, so around kind of Live Aid time, just after. And I compared it, and I remember going out there, and obviously I'm playing to a crowd of kids I know, and I just remember saying something and like getting a laugh or getting a reaction, and just for a second I smelled blood, and I was like, this is what I want to do. This is
really
and it wasn't, I suppose it was affirmation, but I guess I didn't know it was affirmation, because when you do this job and you become recognized and you become famous, you realize that chasing fame for fame's sake is pretty vapid, really. So then you're like, well, but okay, why am I doing this? And we're doing it because I love two things, like curiosity and empathy. Like, they're the sort of, if you haven't got those as a broadcaster, you shouldn't be in the job, right? Everything else you can learn. And then my first, I wasn't like desperate. I didn't just want to be on telly. I want to be famous. I wanted to learn the trade. I wanted to work in telly. I studied politics and communications, and so I really loved politics and history, but there were more of just passions, same as same as food, same as cooking. And it was a period where I thought I might be a chef. Definitely, there was a crossroads where I thought I might end up working in kitchens, and I loved it, and front of house, but learned how to be a chef as well. And that was a genuine fork in the road. And I retook some exams, passed them, and then I went to a really good sixth form in Colchester that just nurtured me really well. And I sort of found my way through exams there, and I really enjoyed that. And then that's sort of where I took off, really. I would go to the library, this is pre-internet, or pre-internet being accessible. Get the Guardian Guide, which had the address of every production company in the country.
Yeah.
And I wrote 300 letters, and I got probably 200 no's, 50 no replies, a couple of maybes, and I got one or two interviews, one for just work experience and one for a job. And I went up and I got this job as a runner for a production company called Barefoot, and I was their kind of office runner, so I'd do everything. I'd be lent out to different productions, and I loved it, and I absolutely loved it. And then after about 6 months, when someone says to you, well, you're not going to get fired, what do you want to do? And I just put my head above the parapet and I just went, well, and I had to be careful about who I said it to. I said, well, I really want to give presenting a go. And this kind of quite gruff archive producer, a guy called Freddie Nottage. Freddie said, well, I've got, I've heard about a screen test going across town for this new Channel 4 show. And I sent a glossy picture and I sent a CV. Didn't have anything else. And I got callback after callback after callback and I got it. And we did the pilot. And something went wrong with like the first take or something. And once again, I said something and the audience laughed and it just felt very at one. And the same thing, I just smelt blood and I was like, I can do this. I know I can do this. I might not be good yet, but I know I can do it. And that's where it started. And I got an agent and a show out of it. And that's where, and then nothing happened really. I then worked behind the scenes and learnt my trade. I was a researcher and assistant producer and producer.
So you worked your way up, yeah.
Yeah, and then I was a researcher on a show called Light Lunch, Mel and Sue's Light Lunch, and if you remember that, and they gave me the job of warming up the crowd as well as researching.
It's really interesting hearing that you with like feeding off the live audience, because I guess you're doing live TV, right, with a lot of the work that you're doing, but I guess it's not a lot of it isn't to an audience. So did you like thrive the most when you're doing things like, did you love shows like doing the X Factor, for example, the most because there was like a live audience there?
You always feel like the crew of your audience.
Right.
You always feel like there's an audience there.
Right.
And then so I was doing warm up, and then Andy Peters was a guest on the show, saw me do warm up. We had a couple, and got chatting to him, and he said, "Look, I'm starting this thing on Channel 4." Had a cup of coffee with him, and he said, "Like, I can't give you a job, but I'll give you a screen test. I'll keep you in mind." And I am so indebted to Andy because
Andy is in competitions. Andy.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah. What you have to understand about Andy is if he wanted to, Andy could be in the running to be the next Director General of the BBC. Andy is whippet smart. And if he'd have chosen to go down that route, he'd be running channels now. But I think he just likes the gym too much and likes smoothies and wants an easy life. Because he started T4 and he was able to buy the shows we watched. So he was responsible for like Dawson's Creek, and he executive produced the show. He studio directed the show from time to time, which is an unbelievably difficult thing to do. And he was just a great talent spotter and just a genuinely lovely guy. So just a brilliant man. So Andy gave me a screen test. I got the job, and then I was doing a magazine sports show with Margarita Taylor, and I was like, I'm so happy. And then Andy said, "Look, Ben Shepherd's got to go and do a wedding. His best friend's getting married, so I want to get more than one presenter on T4. I wanted to make it more of a stable. So will you and Margarita come and do live?" And I remember I've never been more nervous in my entire life. We did it, loved it, and then he kept us on.
Wow, what a great story. I love that. And Andy was a big part of that.
Huge.
And now, you're like in a handful of kind of national treasure broadcasters that feel like a constant presence in our lives, that I imagine a lot of people feel like they know you. Do you feel like they actually only know a version of you though?
I don't know. It's such a nice thing to hear that, because life goes so quickly. You don't think that that's the case, but it's really lovely when you hear it. They definitely know you've got to be you on telly, because, people smell a fraud. And also, if you're not you on television or radio, you kind of shouldn't be doing the job you're doing. Like,
yeah.
And I know people that still are quite reticent about, and that's not about oversharing or anything like that. But I know some people are sort of reticent just to be themselves on television. And I think they should be, because that's why they got the job in the first place. So don't be afraid. And people sort of they see through, not a fraud, but they see through those walls being put up, and like I said, that doesn't mean you need to tell everyone everything about you all the time. And when I'm with my son, who I don't put any pictures of him online or anything, I'm just like, I'm not like super, super protective or anything, but I would never have a picture with at sort of family time. But then if someone just comes up and they want a picture and they're respectful while I've got my child with me, that's fine as well. I'll just make sure we shoot that way. And I think I always say that TV is you at a party, and you at a party is different to you reading a book at home. You hosting a party is making sure everyone's got a drink and making sure everyone's happy and making sure, because you invite them into your house and they're your guests, and that's how I feel. That's how I feel hosting TV is. That's how I can compare it to it.
That is such a great analogy. Well, we move on to chapter 3, and that is the place where you learn the most about yourself.
I've travelled around America on my own, and I also travel around France and Spain on my own by train. I love travelling by train, and I actually really like travelling on my own. But I took a rail pass for 3 months, and I started in New York and did a W and ended up in Seattle. And I ran out of money in Seattle, so I sort of stayed there for 2 weeks before I flew home. So I got to Seattle really well. But when you travel on your own, you get to know yourself super well, even though I was quite young. And it's about holding your nerve, because the first 2 days you absolutely shit yourself and go, I'm not going to say a word to anyone for 3 months. This is like, I'm going to live like a monk. This is crazy. And then very quickly you realize, there's a lot of other people your age probably traveling and having the same experience. Yeah. So I actually made a friend. I met a guy called Steve Vallis in Washington, and went out, and he was traveling with a guy, and we got chatting in a hostel, went out for dinner and a few drinks and had a great night. And then I bumped into Steve in New Orleans, completely apropos. This is like pre-mobile phone. So when you bump into someone, like when you lose someone, they are gone.
Yeah.
And bumped into Steve in New Orleans. We had another great night. And Steve is Australian, and I kind of worked in hospitality for a long time, and now he works in some kind of finance job. And Steve swings by in London, and I see him from he calls me up if he's in town, and we have a drink together. He's the nicest guy.
That's so nice.
My point being that you can bump into people, and then before you know it, you're having the best time with people, and you can dip in and dip out of that, and it's still it's kind of a singular experience, and then it can be far more kind of collegiate. So traveling around America, definitely.
Was there a place on that route that you thought was particularly surprisingly amazing?
Well, I needed to see New York for the first time to fall in love with it, knowing that I was going to love it. Yeah. I think seeing the Pacific for the first time, I mean, LA is a pretty intimidating place when you first go. It took me a while to get to love LA, and I do love it now. But when I first went, I was like, what is this? But seeing the Pacific, I was on a train from New Orleans to Los Angeles. That's 44 hours.
Wow.
And I was with this crazy guy, older guy, who we'd get to a station, they go, we're going to stop here for 10 minutes to take our water or something, and we'd run into town and run back just to see we could see the town. And to start with, he was doing it. I was like, you're crackers, man. I'm not doing that. And then it's just did it a couple of times, and I'm thinking, I just feel so alive. All my stuff's on that train. If it's gone, it's gone. But seeing the Pacific for the first time was just, and I stayed in this lovely little place. And weirdly, even though I've been back to LA so many times since, and worked there for so long and lived there for a little bit and stuff, I had never been back to this little town called Hermosa Beach. And it's south of Venice, by about 6 miles maybe. And, Venice is pretty rough now, especially at night time. But Hermosa is this cute little beach town. And that's just really lovely.
Oh, gorgeous. I love it. I have to say, I love LA. But the thing is that the West Coast is just changing so quickly that I think if you haven't gone back for a few years, like you say, Venice is rough now. I didn't realize that. I guess it just changes so quickly.
Yeah, definitely.
Same as San Francisco.
Yeah. Although I was in San Francisco this year, and I love San Francisco. And people say, San Francisco's kind of, the homeless problem is out of control. Yes and no. Yes, it is, but it's also, there's a reason why a lot of people end up there. The locals are telling me this, that people get really well looked after there. So,
oh really?
And so sort of San Francisco kind of working out how they, and this is only anecdotal, so I don't know this for a fact, but this is what the locals are telling me. They're trying to work out how they can be compassionate with people who have substance abuse issues, because if you just throw them in jail, you criminalize it, you just kick it, that you're kicking the can down the street. So a lot of people go there because A, they know they won't die in the winter, and B, they know it's a pretty safe place to be. So when people say to me, "Oh, is it safe there?" It felt completely safe. It just felt quite sad. We're seeing a lot of like casualties on a daily basis, and the fentanyl problem is just terrible. But it's still a beautiful city, and I really love it. I love San Francisco.
All of California.
So yeah, I think learning about myself, traveling on my own by train around the States.
So chapter 4, your all-time favorite destination. Where's your favorite today?
Puglia in Italy, 100%.
Oh, love Puglia.
Puglia in Italy, specifically Salento in Italy, has my heart. Like, we found a little old olive grove there 15 years ago, which we bought. And we had friends of friends down there. We went to go and visit and saw this place, and immediately I fell in love with it. And it's one of the loves of my life. And I've got friends down there. Some are from Britain and some are Italian. And it's this incredible country where everything can happen and nothing can happen exactly at the same time. And it's so far south. So we're in the tip of the stiletto. So, if you need sort of documentation done, it has to be done by, you've got to go meet the lawyer, and then you've got to go meet the accountant, and then it has to be done in triplicate, and blah, blah, blah. And it's impossible. And then you can say, I just want a massive fish. And, someone will go, my mate Paolo will go, yeah, I can get you a massive fish. Yeah, no problem at all. And then before you know it, you know what I mean? It's like everything can happen and nothing can happen. But for me, it's that lovely, it's a love for life that Salentinos have. And it's the food and the climate and the people. But, I am never happier than when I'm driving around in a dusty espadrille and, a t-shirt or no top on, and I'm just swimming in the sea, picking up stuff for dinner and coming home. And I've had the best meals of my life are on plastic plates by the side of a beach down there, just shoveling fritto miso in my mouth and drinking a local beer, and that's just my happy place.
Oh, sounds dreamy. What would be your perfect day? How would you spend your perfect day with your family down there?
Oh, it's a good question. I'd get up, maybe a quick run, something like that. We've got a cat called Marley, who's not our cat, but just like is the cat. Feed Marley, go and get some local pastries, because there's the cafes down there are just like next level. Spend the day chilling. We're not massive lunch people, because I always think like you could be doing something else when you had a lovely breakfast and you're going to have some dinner, and then go to one of the local bays for the afternoon, and then you get a quick dinner, like in a kind of lovely little beachside cafe, trattoria down there, and then mooch on home.
It sounds so
lots of swimming in the sea.
Gorgeous. Yeah. Did you swim in the sea a lot in Ireland as well growing up?
Oh yeah, it's funny. Someone said the other day to swim. While swimming, or as we call it, swimming.
Yeah. People in Ireland are pretty intrepid with their, I guess, seawater swimming, open water swimming.
I was shooting a series a few years ago about Ernest Shackleton. We ended up going down to Cork, and we were there, and we were doing this thing on the cliff top, beautiful kind of drone shot in Cork. And there were these girls who I got chatting to, like I think they were nurses or something, and they were just going off for a swim. And we went up, and we were up there for like 45 minutes. It was a lovely day, but it's still the Atlantic Sea, like. And we came down, and they were still in the sea, chatting. I was like, "What are you built from?"
They're tough ladies in Ireland, aren't they? They really are. I feel like most people I know who are Irish like to swim in the sea most days. It's an amazing part of their kind of daily ritual.
Yeah, and also there's a big sauna culture that's cropped up now as well over there.
Oh, really?
So do a lot. Yeah, when my mum and dad does a lot of lovely saunas and stuff.
Oh, how nice. Dermot, is your hidden gem. So that's a place that you love that maybe isn't as well known for my listeners.
Well, I'm sure your listeners know Oslo, but some of the little towns dotted around Oslo, or Oslo as a destination, and yes, it's expensive, but a weekend in Oslo is such a fun, brilliant. I mean, I love a European city that's not too big, because obviously London is huge, and quite unmanageable. And that kind of, I love London to pieces, but some of the frustrating things about London are, one of the things that frustrates me about London is that things can come to London, they can be here, whether it's a theatre show or whatever, happen and leave without me even knowing they were here, and it's just drives me up the wall. Which is why I love the size of a continental capital. And Oslo, for me, the great thing about Oslo is you've got the fjords, so you can swim in the sea down there. The seafood's incredible. The restaurants are brilliant. But you're out of the city so quickly. So in the winter, we ski in the Oslo Winter Park, which is, to all intents and purposes, like getting on the Victoria line and getting to the last stop and getting off, and there just being a wilderness and a ski, basically ski mountains there. So I would say Oslo.
Oh, I love that. So going a little deeper into the kind of favorite spots, if you go there quite regularly, do you have a few favorite places that you'd recommend in the city?
Yes, there is. There's an island called Big Day, which isn't necessarily. It's not an island; it's more of a peninsula that a lot of people have there. A lot of people live there. A lot of people holiday there, and it's almost like it's like a small peninsula, and you can Airbnb there, and some great little restaurants, and you can get into town in 10 minutes. So that Big Day for me is where we Airbnb last time we were there and just loved it.
Oh, fabulous. Okay, I want to add to my list. I'm desperate to see the rest of Norway, like going up further north, obviously doing the iconic fjords. Have you done like a kind of cruise ever?
Yeah, what we did. The great thing about Norway is the Hurtigruten is they do a great job marketing it around the world, and it's kind of cruise-esque, but it's also a working boat. So it's still taking post and people and things from the north to the south. So we flew to the north to Kirkenes and then started, which is pretty much on the Russian border, which at the time was like, yeah, great. Not so much now. And then we went all the way down to Oslo, I think we got off, and that's 5 or 6 days. And I would recommend going from north to south.
Okay.
And it's incredible, and it's just you see the Lofoten Islands, and it is the best. Yeah. It's the only way to see Norway, really, because they haven't got any roads and rail up there. So, yeah, and then maybe get off at Bergen, and then take the Bergen train from Bergen to Oslo, which is an epic train journey. And I think you can do it overnight as well. I'm not sure. Every kind of landscape, but you're hitting the mountains going into the sort of then it kind of shallows out as you get down to Oslo. But on the Hurtigruten, you'll see the fjords.
Perfect. That sounds like the best trip. Okay, that's one on the bucket list. So our penultimate chapter, Dermot, is your worst travel experience, or the place that you'd never go back to, chapter 6.
Well, I wouldn't say I'd never go back there, because actually I loved it. But when I was interrailing, I had food poisoning it's either Budapest or Prague. It's Prague. And I love Prague, but turns out I have to love Prague because I spent a lot of time there. And when you're interrailing, sometimes you can get lovely little rooms in a hostel, and sometimes you're in a gymnasium. And it was one of those nights I was in the gymnasium. I woke up and it just absolutely, and I ran to the toilet, what I thought was a toilet, opened it, and it was just this, and I was running over people. It was just a big gym. I was running over people, kicking people in the head and stuff, but I'm so sorry. And I got to what I thought was the toilet. It was a broom cupboard, and I was like, oh God, this is a work. And then now frantically trying to find a found the toilet, didn't leave the toilet, and then had to cross Prague for the next day, just dying. And then me and my mate Glenn found this youth hostel, and it was like, well, we had rooms. It was just manna from heaven. And I remember just convalescing in Prague. But it was probably the worst night of my life.
Have you gone back to Prague to rewrite those?
No,
those
and I really love Prague. So it's not, I wouldn't say don't go back there. It was just a bad
We are on to the final chapter now, Dermot. That is chapter 7. The destination that's at the top of your travel bucket list. Where would you love to go that you've not yet been?
I've probably got a couple.
Go for it.
But Japan, I think, tops it. Japan, South Korea, because I just haven't had the opportunity, and I would love to spend more time. I'd love to spend more time in South America and Central America. But I think like a few of my friends have been to like spent time in Japan. They just say it's just so it's modern, but at the same time it's so insular, and it's so not secretive, but traditional, and has its own way and has its confidence about its way. It feels like nowhere else in the world, really. And they say Korea feels. This is just anecdotal, so it's just it's only people's opinions. But they say Korea feels a bit more probably outlooking, but I'd love to see both of them, South Korea and Japan. Yeah,
I feel like Dermot's Taste of Japan is coming soon.
Now we're talking. That, and also I'd really love to spend a bit more time in America or New England. That sort of New England up to Maine would be a proper road trip for me.
Yeah. Oh, well, I hope that you get there sometime very soon. Thank you so much, Dermot O'Leary. Those were your travel diaries. What an honour and a pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks, Holly.